I'm gone.
Yes.
Going Ben?
Hi, Navia.
I'll take this call downstairs.
So my small group is joining today.
Hi, small group.
So
What's
we
up,
have
Navia?
Rupa in the house. We got Navia, and then we have Anjali,
Hi.
and then we have Lito.
Hi.
Navia, you guys are in New York?
Yeah, we're in New York. Actually, Lito, you want to come?
Yeah.
Alexa.
Together. Yeah, we're in Long Island. So it's like Queens, Long Island people. Yeah.
I'm not gonna say anything to that, but okay.
So that's wait, none of them know you guys. Can you guys say your name?
Yeah, we will in a second. Melissa, are you ready?
Oh, okay.
All right, so welcome to the first Christus Vivit web series that we're going to be doing. And Sony and Remyia are going to be leading us on this first webinar, and the title being "What Does It Mean to Be Young?" This was a very special apostolic exhortation for many of us that had started reading this early on when it first came out, and very quickly I think a few of us realized that so many pieces of it were speaking directly to the Jesus Youth Movement because of its connection with community, its conversations about what does it mean to be young in the world today, what does it mean to live as a youth, but not just in age, but in spirit and in heart. And so we just wanted to dive into that and see from and hear from the people that are living out similar themes in their own daily life. And so without further explanation, I'll hand it to Remyia and Sony. Take it away, guys.
All right, hi guys. Welcome to Chicago. We're broadcasting live from Chicago. Not going to say anything about the greatest city or anything like that. Don't want to upset anybody before we get started. But my name is Sony.
And I'm Remyia.
Just to give you a little bit of background, I work as a teacher. I'm married. I have 4 kids. The house so that way.
Can't hear you guys. We're losing.
You guys froze.
I guess they're closed for everyone.
Yeah, they're frozen for me too.
Yeah.
I texted them. Oh, hold on.
You can see them now.
They're figuring it out.
Please pause for technical difficulties.
It's just the Chicago.
Oh, wow.
There's
More people.
Pause for more technical difficulties. All right, guys, I think they're gonna log back on.
Maybe we could do a quick names if until they come back. If everyone wants to shout out their name.
Yeah, I'll go first. Lido.
Anjali.
Navia, Swarupa.
Hi, I'm Jaron in Baltimore.
I'm Jilu, Massachusetts.
We are the Nadarajans from Florida.
Hi, Tia.
In the way.
I'm Anthony from Arkansas.
Matthew from Florida.
Arun from New York.
Sherbin from Florida.
Where are you? Sabin and Sherbin.
Hi, Mama.
Jomi and Justin from Virginia.
Melissa from Florida. They're back.
Sorry.
My bad. Our bad. Let's pull this up again.
We had some nice time talking.
You guys just built up the suspense. Now we're just so excited.
Well, we were figuring that, you know what, if we can't do it, Melissa will just take it. You want to do it.
Sure.
Okay, let's get this back on.
Thank you, everybody, for your patience.
You're so nice trying to.
Hi, Sindo.
Ha! Sindhajiti. Hello.
All right.
So last we talked, you had 4 kids.
That's the last thing you heard?
Wow, we talked for a long time then.
Okay. All right. So I'm a teacher. I've been a teacher now for 15 years. I have 4 kids and a wife. They are not here right now, so that way you can hear what we're saying. Otherwise, they would be all here and jumping on top of us and this and that. I got involved in Jesus Youth back in 2001 with the preparation for World Youth Day in Toronto. And World Youth Day Toronto was really my experience, a big experience for me in the Lord, and then in the movement as well.
Okay. Yeah, so I was saying that I was born and brought up in Chicago. I am currently a physical therapist. I've been working for about 3 years. And I started my journey in the movement in 2008. And ever since then, I've been traveling a lot to awesome places and even just having a wonderful journey with the Lord and kind of growing in my faith and things like that. So when we were asked to do this, we at first, we were like, yeah, we can do it. We're fine. And this is going to be great. But I'm so thankful that Pope Francis wrote this because it's so easy to understand the writings of Pope Francis. Nothing to do with any other Pope, but it's just really beautiful to see how much Pope Francis loves us. And so we're going to kind of just I'm sure everyone knows this, but for everyone to be on the same page, the Christus Vivit is a post-synodal apostolic exhortation on the young people, faith, and vocational discernment. And so the beginning of this in the introduction, Pope Francis actually says this to us, and I really felt like he was saying it to us, that he was like, Christ is alive and he wants you to be alive. And it's so beautiful the way that he goes through this document and goes through everything. It felt like very much that he's speaking to us, and especially us as Jesus Youth in the movement, and even young people who are just desiring to grow for the faith as well. So we kind of have like certain sections that we went over and we're going to be talking about. So these are kind of the outline of what we want to talk about, like where in the Word of God and what does the Word of God say about young people. We're going to kind of look into a little bit about reflecting on the life of the young Jesus, and then a little bit about what it means when it says we are the now of God, and when Pope Francis calls us we are the now of God. And the last thing, which is a little bit about a healthy restlessness that many young people kind of go through. And so if there are any questions, I think there's a chat that you can kind of type in things like that, and maybe we can talk about it after. We will definitely have some time for questions and discussions, but we're going to kind of share some things. And so if we fall off again, Melissa, this time you're going to take the rest of the presentation. So, but all right. So specifically through the Word of God, the Pope Francis actually starts off with very clearly saying what the Word of God says about the young people. And so we can start off by seeing that many of us may have heard of the story of the prodigal son, where he left, took his like money of the father, and then went and then came back because he was kind of used at all and stuff. So he found the strength. What the document actually goes into, he says, prodigal son found the strength to make a new start and determined to get up and return home. So it really says that the young hearts are naturally ready to change and to turn back and get up and learn from life, and we don't really, and I'm not an older person. I would consider myself still a youth to say that I think we do that, and maybe what they're referring to is that some of the older ones are more stubborn and they don't want to turn back so easily or have that push. And in addition to that, Paul actually talks about young people having a heart capable of loving. So whereas everything that separates us from the others makes the soul grow old. And he also goes into a little bit of detail in regards to Colossians chapter 3. And he says these specific characteristics of what it means to be put, to have a youthfulness in your heart. He says that there is compassion, a heart is filled with kindness, humility, meekness, and patience, and especially bearing one another and forgiving each other. And so if there's any complaints against each other. So it's actually really beautiful to see that, like, you know, this is what the Bible and the Word of God speaks of what young people are in. And I think it's beautiful how it starts an explanation of what it means to be young, and then it kind of goes into a beautiful more reflection that when we're going to be talking about it in the in the presentation.
So as Remyia was speaking about that, you know, especially with the disparity between the old and the young, especially with regards to the way that the Lord is calling us to live, a youthful take on things, or even living in a youthful way, really allows a person to be much more obviously young in the way that they deal with things and the way they look at things and stuff like that. And so when in this, he's talking about how young people are able to have compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, patience, bearing with one another and forgiving each other. It's easier for a young person to do that as opposed to an older person. Older people are more stuck in their ways. They have a different, maybe they're battle hardened or whatever the case is, hardness of heart, whatever the case is. But for a young person can, although that still, some of that might still be there, they can put that to the side and then still be able to embrace those things. And so that's really part of the beauty of what it is to be a youth.
Yeah, and in addition to that, the Bible, and especially in the New Testament, says that, like, the greatest among you must become like the youngest. And so when we see this, like, really you see Christ even giving the importance to the youth, you know, and it's actually so beautiful the way that the Lord kind of has our back, and he kind of sticks up for us and pushes us, and even like just shows how much he loves us. And in addition, when he says, let no one despise your youth, this is actually from 1 Timothy. And it says that in the document, it beautifully said, like, young people are not meant to be discouraged. They are meant to dream great things and to seek vast horizons, to aim higher, and to take on the world, to accept challenges, and to offer the best of themselves to the building of something better. So that's why, like, you know, the Pope was actually saying, he's like, that's why I constantly urge people not to be robbed of this hope, that they are meant to be so much greater, they're meant to do so much. And so, and totally, like, you know, that's coming from that, you know, that love and that feel from, I guess, like when I'm hearing this and I'm just hearing the Pope, every time I go through this, I just see how much he, like, really just has our back and just loves us. And in addition to what it means to be a youth, it also means to accept the authority of those who are older. So, you know, we can't just be going and doing things on our own and be free and whatever. We have to we have to look up to the elders and seek their guidance where is needed, because they have a plethora or a store of experiences that can teach us and not to make mistakes, or even when we're in mistakes, they can teach us how to overcome them and even learn from them. So, Jordan said I have to slow down. I'm sorry, I do talk really fast, but anyway, so I'm gonna hand it over to Jordan too, so we can slow down.
So I was working on some stuff for my son as he was preparing to do a presentation on Pope John Paul II. And I was watching a bunch of different videos and looking at different things. And there were, you know, Pope John Paul II, especially towards the end of his life, he was very obviously old. He was in his 80s. He had Parkinson's. It was very hard for him to speak. It was very hard for him to walk, even to move and things like that. There was a celebration. I think he was celebrating the Mass somewhere, and during one of the talks or the homily that he was giving, he said, "I am 83 years young," And he tried with all of his vigor and all of his life to just be like, yeah. And even though the Holy Father, of course, was in an 83-year-old body, he still saw himself very much as young, as young at heart, especially. And that, I think, is really one of the beauties of what young people have to offer. In that, have you ever, if you remember, this is more of a guy example, ladies, you might be able to relate, but I know for a guy, like guys, maybe when you're in high school or college or even younger, and there was something that was in front of you, say someone was messing with someone, or there was a fight about to break out, or there was something that you felt really, really strongly about, that you're like, no, that can't happen. And you just, like, you jumped right in and you got into whosever face it was, and you're like, no, that's not going to happen. You know, at that moment, you're not thinking of the consequences. You're not thinking that, oh my gosh, something bad could happen, like an older person would. Like, I would think for my kids, if my kids ever jumped into something crazy like that, I'd be like, what are you thinking? Like, you're going to get beaten up, or something bad's going to happen to you. But part of that youthfulness that one has, or that heart of youthfulness that one has, is this idea or this sense of invincibility, that nothing can touch you. And it's with that courage that you move forward. And that, I think, that's one of the key things that Jesus is talking about here. So when we're looking at and learning from the life of young Jesus, what are even older Jesus, when Jesus was older, when he was doing his ministry, what are some key takeaways that we can take from this for our lives? How can we become youthful following the example that Jesus gave us? And so, first off is this unconditional trust that he had in the Lord, in his Father. You know, Jesus came to earth. He lived here for 33 years. He had his parents, Joseph and Mary, that took care of him. And then he went off on his 3-year ministry, and he went from place to place. And there are several moments and several episodes in the Bible where he is openly praying to the Father, let your will be done. You know, Father, you and I are one. And he is asking, even though he doesn't necessarily have to ask, but he is asking the Father, Father, please, if it be your will, do this or do that. And all of these things are really showing how much he trusted in the Father, how much he knew that my Father will take care of me. And so in our same life as young people, whether we're older young people or younger young people, or anywhere in between, or older than me, but one of the key things that we have to look at is, who do we have our trust in? Who do we have our unconditional trust in? Is our unconditional trust in us, or is it in God the Father, who the Lord teaches us as by example that he will take care of us? The next one that Jesus teaches us is that he maintained friendships, even in troubling times. Even when crisis was there, he remained faithful to his friends. This is a huge example that we have, especially as young people. Those of you who are post-college, you might be able to relate to this more. I can't. I didn't really live on campus, so I don't have these experiences. But those of you who did live on campus, you might be able to have these experiences where the people that you were on campus with, in your dorms, your roommates, those are some of the closest friends that you have. Or even if you go back to, grade school, middle school, high school, the friends that you walked with, the friends that you played with, the friends that you were there, those were some really close friendships, really tight friendships. You guys went through thick and thin. You did some pretty dumb stuff. You did some crazy and amazing things. Those are some really good friends. But what the Lord does is that he goes one step beyond that. It's not just a matter of being there when the times are good. Even if we look at the example of St. Peter betrayed Jesus. He denied even knowing him, but yet Jesus, after the resurrection, still comes back to him and still brings him back into the fold. When Mary and Martha, when they lose their brother Lazarus, Jesus comes to be with them in that time of trouble, to comfort them. And then, of course, ultimately, he performs a miracle for them. And this really is a great example for us to be united with each other, to be united with the Father, and then to be united with our brothers and sisters around us in really strong friendships. Because those friendships are really where we're going to end up, as a community, as a body of Christ, that we move closer to the Lord. And that's truly a sign of youthfulness. And having those friendships and maintaining those friendships is very important. The next one is that he showed tremendous compassion for the weakest, especially the poor, the sick, sinners, and the excluded. A lot of times when we look at the way that older people look at things and the way that younger people look at things, younger people find it easier to accept people in wherever they are, in whatever it is that they do, in whatever situation they've gotten themselves into. For an older person, it might be a little harder to do that. No, that's wrong. Like everything is black and white kind of thing. But a youthful person, or a person who is young at heart, if they follow the example of Jesus, compassion is the key. Compassion for those who are weak. Compassion for those who are suffering. Compassion for those who are marginalized. Just look at the response that young people are. Look at the response that young people have, especially with regards to things that happen in social media. Not even social media, but like in the world. But then the reaction that happens as a result through social media. How young people come out very loudly and say, no, that's right. No, that's wrong. Oh, I can't believe this and this and that. That's good. That's a good place to start. And that's really what our youthfulness is calling us to. Not to just be like, oh yeah, I've heard this before, been there, done that, jaded about the whole situation, or this, or oh yeah, they kind of deserve it to be that way. It's their fault. Instead of being like that, being young calls us to be compassionate, and also calls us to do something about it. You look at Jesus in all the situations that he saw with people suffering. He didn't just stand there and be like, I feel really bad for you. He did something about it. He went up to them. He touched them. He broke the social barriers. And that's something that young people really have a heart to be able to do, to stand up for people, to do what's right, more so than an older person who's not as young at heart. Courage. He had the courage to confront the religious and political authorities of his time. Like I was saying with the example earlier, when you see something bad going on in front of you, and you just jump into action, you're not really thinking about what's happening. That in and of itself is courage, being very courageous to say, you know what? No, that's not good enough. I remember when we were at our church, we were setting up for some event that was taking place. And one of our kids he was a college guy. We were setting up, and I don't know, maybe some of the older people, there was some of the men who were there, they were playing cards. Maybe they were gambling or something. I don't know. I wasn't there. This guy, he got really upset about it. This is in a church. It's in the hall of the church, but he's like, hey, you can't do this. We're trying to set up for this thing. You can't be sitting here and playing cards. You can't be sitting here and gambling. This is wrong. Who told you had the permission to do this? That's courageous. To stand up against like 5 or 7 men, bigger, stronger, older, and to say something as bold as this, I mean, that takes a lot of guts. And that's really what Jesus comes and shows us, right? Look at the example of when you have the woman who is caught in adultery. The law says very clearly what should happen to this woman. But Jesus stood up before all of them, go ahead, and let's see, he who is free of sin, let him cast the first stone. And he starts writing. Or all those times when the Pharisees have something smart to say to him, he calls them out on it. You brood of vipers. And this is the establishment, this is the authority. But because he was able to see the wrong that they were doing, he didn't care. He came out and he said it like it was. To have that courage to stand up for what's right is really one huge sign of youthfulness. Understanding another person's pain. Jesus knew what it was like to feel misunderstood and rejected. He was, right? If we look at, although the story doesn't necessarily say too much about that, but you can only imagine how Jesus was probably treated when he met up with the rest of the family, the rest of the community. When people started asking, hey, whose son are you? And Joseph and Mary and the rumor mill and all this kind of stuff, you can only imagine how people saw that. Even as he would say to his disciples, foxes have dens and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to rest his head. He was poor. He didn't have anywhere to go. Even through the suffering that he goes through we'll go into that next one. But he was very much misunderstood. When he's being tried or questioned by Pontius Pilate, oh, did you do this? Did you do that? Or even when he's before the Sanhedrin and he's answering all these questions and they say, well, he said that he would knock down the temple in 3 days and he would raise it back up. Completely misunderstood everything that he was actually said. But he bears that. And so he understands. And so that's really one of the things, especially when we look at, 2 points before, the compassion for the weakest. The reason why young people are able to understand or have compassion for the weakest is because young people are able to look more towards themselves, or a person who is young at heart is able to look at themselves and realize, hey, that could be me. Or, hey, I was in a similar situation like that. To have that empathy. So that also is a sure sign of youthfulness. He experienced the fear and suffering. He experienced the fear of suffering and knew the frailty of the passion. There are a lot of times where as we grow up, we realize that as we're going down this path, this is not going to be fun. That we know that, hey, as we go through this is going to be very, very painful. And in the same way, Jesus, he knew that too. He already knew what was going to happen at the Passion. He already knew that he was going to have to suffer through all of this pain. He was going to have to see his mother, and his mother was going to have to watch him die on this cross. That he was going to be scourged and whipped, and he was going to fall, and he was going to have to carry this big heavy cross, and then he was going to have holes pierced into his hands and into his feet and into his side and put up on this cross and then hang there for this long. He knew all of that. And he knew how human he was. In the same light, we also realize how human sometimes, especially once we get that whole invincibility idea out of our heads, we realize how frail we are and how much pain this is going to have to take to get through. But that's another sign of youthfulness that Jesus shares with us, and that he calls us to as well. To have that, that he was with us when, in the same way that we fear suffering, or the suffering that is about to come because of a choice that we make, he also had that fear. And he also knew the frailty of the passion. And this is one key thing, especially for young people, to have his gaze Jesus had his gaze to the future. He wasn't looking at what happened in the past. His eye was set on the future. And if you look at one of the coolest things of young people is that they have their eyes set on the future. Older people, maybe not. They're maybe more in the present, or they're maybe a little bit in the past with reminiscing on what's happened in the past and this and that, bringing up old photos and things like that and videos. But a young person, they're not necessarily worried about the past. They're looking to the future, right? A person who is in high school, I teach high school students. A person who is in high school, although this doesn't always happen with my students, unfortunately, but a person in high school is looking towards the future. I'm going to go to college. I'm going to get this job. I'm going to do this. I want to move there. That's where I want to be. And that really is beautiful. If we look at Jesus, he goes through this entire passion, all of this suffering, carrying this cross and everything else that came with it. Why? Because he was looking to the future. He was looking to salvation. And so in the same light, young people, or people who are young at heart, have to have this gaze to the future, have to be able to see the end of all of this. What does this all mean? Have to see where we're going. Now, because of all of this, the Lord calls us, or in here, the Pope talks about how you are the now of God. So like I said in the beginning, my faith experience came at World Youth Day 2002, which took place in Toronto, Canada. I remember for the opening ceremony, it was Pope John Paul II. He was riding in from the back. I was lucky enough to get a quick spot close enough to the fence, put somebody up on my shoulders so they could take my camera and take a picture, and the Pope drove by. And I remember as we're watching this on the Jumbotrons and people are standing there, and even like as I was there, like there was this tremendous feeling that you had. I don't even know what to explain. I don't know if you've ever seen like people like crying at a Michael Jackson concert. Be that as it may, let them cry. But this was kind of like that, but there was maybe a little bit more purpose. Anyway, while we're standing there and Pope finally made his way up to the front, and he finally got up onto the stage, and he's talking and he's giving. This is the welcoming ceremony of the World Youth Day for the Holy Father's welcome on the Wednesday. He comes up there and he has a lot to say. And one of the things that he said, and I remember this very, very clearly, one of the things that he says, the young people, I'm paraphrasing, you are not the church of tomorrow. You are the church of today. Rise up. And that really, like, because a lot of times, especially when I was young back then, I was like 21 years old. And so I was young back then. I'm still young.
Still young.
But I remember hearing that because all the time at my church, especially, all we kept hearing was, "Oh, you're the church of the tomorrow. You're the church of tomorrow. You're the future. You're the future. Your time is then." But here, the Holy Father is very loudly coming out and saying, "No, don't worry about. You're not the future. You are now. You are now." And that really was a big wake-up call for me, and that's really what brought me on this path to where I am today in my life of faith. But at the same time, I realized that there were some 50 people or so that came with us to World Youth Day that year. Maybe 800,000 people were there at the final mass for the World Youth Day. So there are a lot of people that heard the message of the Holy Father. But for me, one of the reasons why I was able to stick with it is because I realized very quickly that I couldn't do it on my own. Actually, maybe I didn't realize that I couldn't do it on my own, but there were people there beside me, in front of me, behind me, leading me, pushing me, guiding me to how I can make this a reality in my life forever. And those, of course, were my elders. And so that really made a huge difference. Excuse me. And this is really where the Holy Father is talking about, or the importance of elders in a young person's life. That anyone called to be, let me read this for you. Anyone called to be a parent, pastor, or guide to young people must have the far-sightedness to appreciate the little flame that continues to burn, the fragile reed that is shaken but not broken, the ability to discern pathways where others only see walls, to recognize potential where others see only peril. That is how God the Father sees things. He knows how to cherish and nurture the seeds of goodness sown in the hearts of the young. Each young person's heart should thus be considered holy ground, a bearer of seeds of divine life, before which we must take off our shoes in order to draw near and enter more deeply into the mystery. This really paints a beautiful picture of the importance of elders. So for those people like me at this point in my life, the role that I have in the lives of young people that are around me, it's very, very much important. So I'm a big movie fan, and I hope I'm not ruining any of these movies for you guys, but let's just take an example of Star Wars. for those of you, for those of you who have watched Star Wars or seen the newer episodes, let's just stick with the newer episodes. Here you have two characters. I'll keep it, I won't be too specific in case you want to watch the movies later. I don't want to ruin it for you. You have one character who is moving towards the light, if you will, moving towards the positive side of the force. You have another character who has moved completely the opposite way. And if you look at the storylines of both of these characters, you realize that the one who moved towards the dark side, the reason why they moved towards the dark side is because there was a huge mistake that was made on the part of the elder in their lives. And that mistake caused this person to move to the dark side. Whereas in the case of the other person who is moving into the ways of the force, the eldering that took place for that person was maybe a little bit more positive. And that helped them jump into or continue onto the path. We'll see what happens in the next movie, but continue onto the path of the force. And so if I look at my life, especially, this is really evident there with my elders. When I went to World Youth Day in 2002, I was a person that was not at all confident in myself, very timid, very shy. I'm not about to go sit here and take any sort of lead on anything. I didn't feel the need that I had to. But my elders were the ones that pushed me. My elders were the ones that encouraged me. My elders, the way that they dealt with me, and I'm talking about all of the elders in Chicago. I don't even want to name any by name, but you guys all know who they are. But I don't want to miss anybody by accident. So all my elders in Chicago, they were able to see who I was. They were able to push me as far as they needed to push me without breaking me, because they knew exactly how far my limits were. When I look at how they treated some of my other friends who are in the movement, I see how they talk to those friends of mine, I realized that they knew very much that those guys could take it, but they also knew that I couldn't take it. And so because of that, they treated me, or they dealt with me in a much more different way. And and because of that, I can stand here before you today as a man of faith who is trying to grow in my faith, who is trying to be young and youthful in my faith, who now is working very hard or trying to just do a little bit of what my elders did for me to the young people that are around me. Because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here. In that, even with the young people around here, I'll shake their reeds and try to see as far as I'll go, and trying not to break them, but my elders were really, really good with that. And I'm sure for all of us, especially those who have had good elders, we can all think back to the times where our elders pushed us, our elders were angry at us, our elders yelled at us, and then our elders backed off, and then our elders gave us a hug, or our elders took care of us, or they wiped our tears after we started crying or something like that. And they really took care of us. And that's really one of the beautiful things that we have. And we have to have that. Young people need that. Because without that, that's a huge weapon that's being lost, especially for young people, if that's not there. And so, especially as maybe some of the older people who are here, we are called, we meaning we older people, we are called to be youthful. We're called to have all of these characteristics in our heart and to live as youthful people in our heart. Our bodies are going to get old, but we're still youthful at heart. But at the same time, we really have to help the young people around us grow in that youthfulness, to grow in that beauty of faith. Because just look around outside, read the news, see the crazy nonsense that's going on outside. And we realize that there's a lot of help that our young people need. Society tells us, especially as we're growing up, young people, for those of you who are still in college, high school, young adults, young people the society tells you, go out, have fun. This is the best time of your life. It is. You go out, this whole YOLO mantra, you only live once thing, go try everything, see how it is, you should experiment, this and that. But the world around us is telling us to take our youthfulness and make it a gift to ourselves. But that is totally not what Jesus is teaching us. That's totally not what our bodies are made for through the theology of the body. Like, we are made to be a gift to others. Our youthfulness is such a gift to other people. How? With our time, we can be so generous with our commitment, with our dedication, wholehearted dedication we can give to the sacrifices that we can make that are difficult. But ultimately, those sacrifices are definitely going to be very fruitful. The reason why I can say this today is because maybe my elders might disagree with me. I hope not. But I can say that when I was younger, and the things that I was able to do as a young person, those are things that I unfortunately cannot do this in the same way because I'm an older person. I have a wife. I have 4 kids. Even though I want to, go paintballing with all the kids and, watch a movie at midnight and stay up and yada, 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 all these things, I can't. My baby's going to wake up in the middle of the night. Or not that I don't do much with the baby. My wife feeds the baby at night, so I don't really do anything with the baby. Or I have to wake up and be with them in the morning, or I have to take, when one has a drum lesson in the morning and the other one has a piano lesson on that day, or they have a project coming up for Sunday school or something, that, whatever the case is, I can't do that. I can't be dedicated as much as I was when I was a young person because my state of life doesn't allow me to. I have to be dedicated to my family. Definitely, I am still dedicated to the young people here and to the movement, but not in the same capacity that I was when I was a young person. And so that's really one of the things that this is really talking to us about, being youthful, to make our youthfulness a gift to the church, a gift to the world, a gift to others around us, not to fall into that lie that my youthfulness is for me to enjoy. No, it's not, but to give back to everyone.
Yeah. And I think even when Sorina was saying like how we are the gift for the church, I think for us, like that independent, like even like as a youth now, like my go-to mentality is like doing things for myself and not kind of being that, doing things for the other people or being a gift for others, and I think when we're thinking of like being the now of God, and we also like realistically, we think we have to even go into kind of what is it, who are we, the youth of like now, like what are we, who are we and what are we doing? I know in my life specifically, I won't go too much, but like Sony was like more the quiet, timid, or Sony was more the quiet, timid person, but I was more of like the outgoing and I guess extroverted type of person. And even in that ways, like it's so beautiful that how important eldering is when it comes to kind of taming me and shaping me to be a less like, crazy person, but more of like but it wasn't anything that they're taking away from me. They were just making it more and making it more beautiful so that it can be tuned to being a gift to not only to myself, but for the rest of the world. And so I think that the next section that we're kind of going to be going into is more of kind of like, where's the youth like right now? And I think it's so beautiful where like when in the document it goes through it, like I'd like to say like my youthfulness or the youth, like right now what youth are going through are, it's a time where we're developing our personality, we are dreaming, we are getting we're coming into relationships, friendships, or even more intimate relationships and things like that, and we are trying to find like a balance of kind of building a life, And so this happens through so many trials, this happens through so many experiences, and this happens through, a ton of like do-overs and mistakes and things like that. So, but it's like really, you can kind of see that like we're trying to build like a life, and this is the time where all these things we're growing in ourselves as well. But one thing that this whole YOLO mentality can do is that we kind of go on, like we were saying, like go on off ourselves, and we don't become like more, I guess I'm trying to find the word of like I think we become more selfish, and we don't become selfless. And so that's not what we're called to do. Like Sony was saying, we're actually called to kind of be this and build this life with everyone, And I think like when I'm looking back into my life, I was very much more comfortable in kind of building it for myself and not sharing it with anyone because that was easier. No, I was afraid of like correction. I was afraid of people kind of judging me and the life that I chose and stuff. But I think once I started really growing in my faith and seeing that the power of the love of God really made me see that this life is not meant to be lived alone. This life is not meant to be journeyed through and kind of gone through alone. It's actually meant for a community. So that's why there's the importance of elders. That's why there's the importance of friendships, like genuine friendships, even in trying times and things like that. And it was like such a beautiful realization for me because in my heart, like I'm trying to build this life and there's just like, I don't know what this life looks like, but I want this beautiful life and I want to live this. Like we can even think of a generic like way, like this amazing life that I'm trying to build, you know. But there's a restlessness in our hearts that we're longing for this beautiful life and we're working for this beautiful life, but you know we don't we have this restlessness, you know. And I kind of want to read this from the document, and it says, restless discontent combined with exhilaration before the opening up of new horizons generates a boldness that leads you to stand up and take responsibility for a mission. So it's okay to have this restlessness. It's okay to have this this fighting within yourself because it's for something good. It's actually more beautifully coming from a longing in our hearts to build and become more closer to God. And to have a life that you know is that you're growing with God and you're walking with God and things like that. So I always was afraid of this restlessness because I thought I had to get it all figured out. But it's actually okay because this is why, like in this restlessness, things. I mean, in my life, I can see amazing things are happening. Like I'm getting for example, like you know I started like praying and doing holy hours, which is like 1 hour a day, just specifically for the Lord. And so I thought like this was going to be like something that's more beautiful, like personally for me. And oh my gosh, it was. But I couldn't be okay with having it just within myself. So I started getting other people to do this challenge where like we kind of pray together once a day and we tell each other that we're praying. And in that, like, so this, what I'm saying is, and maybe I'm not clear. If I'm not clear, please explain. But in the restlessness of me wanting to get more closer to God, like, and being with God in that restlessness, I also started having, like, sharing this beautiful gift of, like, praying, you know, setting a time of prayer for the Lord with other people, you know? And I really saw, like, it went on for, like, 1 month that I had people who were doing, like, specific time in the day for the Lord. And it was like so great because we saw fruits in their life. I saw fruits in my life. And so what I'm trying to say is that, like, you know, this restlessness in our hearts is a good thing, but it's a good thing when the Lord is there as well. It is not a good thing when you're doing it on yourself and you're trying to wrestle with yourself. You know, you invite the Lord into that, you know, that wrestle. You invite the Lord into that difficulty and that, you know, internal, like, you know, struggle.
Well, a great example that Remyia is talking about is Lumen Vitae. Here you have people, you know, Jesus Youth has been going to Haiti and doing a bunch of different things, medical missions and this and that in Haiti. But then it really pulled on, you know, specifically Brian's heart that, hey, here are people that we can go and do medical mission and this and that, but here are people that don't have, young people that don't have the basic necessity of being able to get an education. And this moved him so much to the point, you know, he had this restless discontent. He wasn't happy. He wasn't satisfied with the answer that he was given. But this moved him enough through prayer and everything to finally be like, you know what? Forget it. Let's Lumen Vitae. We need to, obviously there's a lot more steps to that. I made it like that.
Let's Lumen Vitae!
That's the dumbed down version of the creation of Lumen Vitae. But he's like, no, forget it. We got to do something about this. And he started then moving through. He jumped through all the hoops that he had to jump through in order to get to Lumen Vitae to where it is today. He took a beating in the process, but he was like, no, he was a man on a mission because he had that restless discontent. He's like, this isn't good enough. We can do better.
Yeah, and it's so beautiful because so when we kind of like wrap up what we're kind of saying and like what it means to be young, I hope in your heart that you also see like in various aspects from this presentation, like you know, that it's not something to be discouraged about. It's actually something to grow in, you know, because when I think it's from this document, Pope Francis says that, you know, when we think of the word young or when we think of the word youth, right, it's actually not a number or it's not a time of like aging or whatnot. It's actually a mentality. It's actually a thought of the mind that when you are young. So that's why when I look at the Jesus Youth movement, there's people like twice as my age and they're still calling themselves a Jesus Youth, you know. And it's actually, that's perfectly what this embodies. It's not a number, it's not like a phase of your life. It's actually a mentality where when you call yourself youth, you know, it's within your heart and it's within your mind, you know. So I think for everybody on this call, even for the older youth, like you are a youth and you are a youth that you are calling, and the Lord is calling us to kind of take in this like youthfulness and to live a beautiful life with the Lord, live a beautiful life with the rest of the world as well. So before we end off, we have actually a challenge for you guys. So I know that when we go, if you guys have your phones or something, you can take a photo and we'll send it out with an email of these characteristics of the life of the young Jesus. So if you can take a photo of this, and we actually ask you maybe in the next week or in the next 2 weeks, like when you're gonna, next time you meet with your group or when you go into reflection, that you actually, what? Oh, sorry. Did I not give you guys enough time? Sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Does everybody have a picture? There you go.
Yeah, you can screenshot this, or we'll give these questions out if you're on the phone. For all the people on the phone, hello. We wish that we could see your face, but we're glad that you can hear our voice, I guess. But okay, so we're asking that every one of you guys, looking at each of the characteristics of the life of the young Jesus, to reflect on how each of those characteristics are present in your life. And then maybe if you see one or two that you feel like you want to work on more and you want to see more of in your life, you actually take the time to work on it more. And then when you come back in your group, or when you come back or you want to share with an elder or with one of your friends, you guys can like talk about this. Because when we look at when we're trying to figure out who we want to be, it's probably not best for us to look at, look up to the Star Wars actors or some of the current models, or I'm sorry, I broke his heart. But to look at the one that we can like have no wrong in, which is Jesus, and looking at his life and seeing, how we can be more like him and how we can be more youthful like him. Because Jesus was young all of his life. I don't think he ever got old. So.
And then if you guys want to go ahead and take a picture of this question as well. Those of you who are meeting with your small groups right now, if you want to go ahead and take some time to go through this together as a group, going through how you live out the ways that Jesus lived out a youthful life, and then talking about how exactly,
Sorry.
how exactly it is that, what are some areas that you can work on? And as small groups and as, intimate groups of friends, cell groups, or whatever you have, use this as an opportunity to grow, to dialogue, to talk to each other. And like Remyia said, if you want to talk to an elder, please, this is a great opportunity to do so. And elders, be ready to have people come talk to you and prayerfully discern on how it is that the Lord wishes for you to guide young people.
So we'd actually like to leave you with what the Pope says about, so in this document, he said, a friend asked the Pope, like, what he sees in a young person. So I'd like to read his response. And maybe we can invite you maybe to close your eyes and kind of hear and maybe feel that the Pope Francis is actually speaking to you. And so Pope Francis' response was, in response to what I see in a young person, is, I see someone who is searching for his or her own path, who wants to fly on their 2 feet, who faces the world and looks at the horizon with eyes full of the future, full of hope as well as illusions. A young person stands on 2 feet as adults do, but unlike adults whose feet are parallel, he always has 1 foot forward, ready to set out, to spring ahead.
Always racing onwards. To talk about young people is to talk about promise and to talk about joy. Young people have so much strength. They are able to look ahead with hope. A young person is a promise of life that implies a certain degree of tenacity. He is foolish enough to delude himself and resilient enough to recover from that delusion.
And if it's all right, do you mind if we just say a quick prayer for all of you guys, and if you guys can keep us in your prayers as well? So, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Lord Jesus, we thank you so much for giving us this beautiful opportunity to see and go into what it means to be young. We ask in a special way that we take what we heard from you especially, and what we heard from Pope Francis, and to keep it in our hearts so that we will continue to grow into the life that the Lord wants us to live as a young person. And we especially offer up to you every single person on this call, every single person in our lives that we know that are helping us become young. We thank you so much for giving us such a beautiful church to inspire us to be young as well. And for all this, we lift all our intentions up to you as we pray, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. In the name of the Father,